35% affirmative action, and deletion of the Land Use Act from the Constitution. We spoke with some lawmakers to understand why senators voted against some of the areas up for amendments.
What we were asking for was a simple thing. It was not for election. It was just on appointments, so that at least when you are appointing ministers, you give 35% dues to women. That is not equality, but it still was not easy for them. The CSOs did so much of lobbying. We also did so much of lobbying. I woke up and resumed here as early as possible, and I spoke to every senator. But when it came to the vote, you couldn't be there. And the voters still, with the background of fears and cultural views, religious tendencies. And I don't think you can take that out.
I think with time, maybe we're able to do some more education, some more orientation, that this indeed isn't harmful or not intended to be harmful to the male folks, but it's something that will actually lead to, I don't use the word liberation, that's scary for them, I believe, but something that will empower everyone.
Obviously, it appears that consensus on the devolution of powers and true federalism and all that doesn't yet exist as far as this Senate is concerned.
Meanwhile, in the House of Representatives, voting did not hold as scheduled, as the bulk of the time was spent validating the integrity of the system. After several attempts, it appears the leadership is indeed satisfied with the system, but the House decides to put off voting until Thursday, July 27th. The ball is now in the court of the House of Representatives to conclude the process and finally decide which items will be amended by the National Assembly in the 1999 Constitution. Linda Akibi, Channels Television News.
And to discuss the ongoing amendment process, I'm now being joined on the News at 10 by a Professor of Law, Akin Oyebode. Thank you so much, Professor, for joining us on the News at 10.
You're welcome.
What's your impression about this ongoing process? Just tell us that generally before we get into the specifics.
Well, I honestly believe that the National Assembly is incompetent to fabricate a constitution for Nigeria or even amend what passes as the Nigerian constitution. Except, of course, if they are looking at the 1999 constitution as just another statute. Maybe on that basis they will have some point, because that constitution is actually Decree 24 of 1999. I'm saying this because the primary function of legislatures, at least in so many countries that we know of, is that of making law for the peace, order, and good government of the countries, not to make a constitution or amend same. I hasten to add that the amending formula in constitutions in various countries of the world is usually made a little bit, it's entrenched, complex, so that it's not an easy thing. So I believe what the National Assembly should be busy doing is passing laws to draw up the modalities for convening a constituent assembly that will give us an autochthonous constitution. What they are doing for me is like excessive. They don't have that mandate.
So who can? This constituent assembly you're speaking about? How
they can make laws that will inform the convening and the functions of a constituent assembly. So once the constituent assembly is convened and they elaborate a new constitution for Nigeria, then such new constitution will be put to the litmus test of constitution making across the world. That is a referendum. So if the Nigerians vote and endorse what the Constituent Assembly gives us, 51% of the electorate, then we'll say a new constitution has come into being. Because right now, you have to remember the history of efforts to amend the Constitution. Under Obasanjo's watch, about 118 amendments were suggested for the Constitution. Well, that went through a sorry pass. Then also, on the 7th Assembly, I believe, chalked up to 62 or thereabout amendments, proposals. If a constitution should engender such numerous amendments, sort of panel beating, I think Nigerians will prefer a brand new car than a thorough panel beating car with so many amendments.
So there is that argument of us having a brand new one, but for now, what is happening is, like you said, trying to touch up bits of it. And one issue I wanted to bring up to your attention is the devolution of power issue. A lot of Nigerians hoped it would go differently. It didn't. So what do you make of that?
I'm not altogether surprised. When we were at the confab, we tried to suggest the necessity for devolution. But there were many forces there gathered that were not totally convinced that Nigeria needed restructuring, reconfiguration, or in fact, devolution of powers. And I'm not surprised that at the present point in time, there are so many members of Senate that have a vested interest in maintaining the status quo. So, for me, they've lost the time and the opportunity. It's a missed opportunity to make a statement when the only game in town right now is devolution of powers, what they call restructuring. If you don't restructure Nigeria, then Nigeria will die. It's as simple as that.
Do you think that has turned people off the process if that one issue was not solved?
Look, the efforts by the Senate amount to emphasizing trifles, and they leave the main issue out of contention. If you don't do anything about dismantling or restructuring or reconfiguring the modalities of our cohabitation, then what's the point? Quite sincerely, we have to speak the truth to ourselves. Without restructuring, without rethinking and elaborating the modalities of our coexistence, really, they've lost the game.
There were a set of people that were a bit happy. Local government autonomy made them at that level happy that, you know, they had voted for. But what sort of autonomy are we talking about? What shape would it take, would you think?
In my view, in fact, the Constitution should not talk about local governments. You remember the late Chief O'Neill, Speaker of the House of Representatives in the United States. He used to say that all politics was local. So if we agree with that contention, then what is the business of the Constitution with local governments? Local governments are local matters. The Constitution should not be involved at all. What we need really is to reconstitute what you call the federating units, because we now have 36 states that carry their feeding bottles to Abuja once a month to be replenished. They really have no muscle, they have no backbone. They don't have the wherewithal for their sustenance. So the primary issue is to reconstitute, reformulate the units that comprise the federation, if indeed we want to be a federal government. What we have now is a quasi-unitary military imposition which lacks credibility, is counterproductive, is dysfunctional, and in fact gives the impression, that we are a federation, when in actuality we are a unitary setup. The military have always been uncomfortable with federalism, and that's why they could not think of any other arrangement but a quasi-unitary setup. I think Nigerians have come of age. The time is right for us now to reconsider, rethink, and reinvent the modalities of our coexistence.
A very strong position there. Thank you so much, Professor Akin Oyebode, for sharing your thoughts with us on the News at 10 tonight. Thank you.
Oh shit, oh take, pray them niggas go away. Oh, we sell the clowns around it, look like circus show.
Vote in favor of reducing the time for the president or governor to authorize the withdrawal of monies from the Consolidated Revenue Fund in the absence of an Appropriation Act from 6 months to 3 months. In addition, lawmakers support financial autonomy for state houses of assembly. They scrapped the State Independent Electoral Commission and set a time frame for the president and governors to appoint ministers and commissioners within 30 days of coming into office. However, senators vote against devolution of powers to states, 35% affirmative action, and deletion of the Land Use Act from the Constitution. We spoke with some lawmakers to understand why senators all approached the chamber with the same intention of voting to amend several sections of the 1999 Constitution.
And therefore, I crave your indulgence that I come and lay this.
All seated, legislative proceedings begin. There are 33 constitution amendment bills before these lawmakers, and each bill must get 2/3 majority votes before it is passed.
This seeks to alter Section 1.
The Senate President announces each bill and voting begins.
The ayes have it.
Lawmakers vote in support of local government autonomy, independent candidacy, reduction of age qualifications for President, the Senate, House of Representatives, and state houses of assembly. Senators also voted against some of the areas up for amendment.
Because what we were asking for was a simple thing. It was not for election. It was just on appointments, so that at least when you are appointing ministers, you give 35% dues to women. That is not equality, but it still was not easy for them. The CSOs did so much of lobbying. We also did so much of lobbying. I woke up and resumed here as early as possible, and I spoke to every senator. But when it came to the vote, you couldn't be there. And the voters still, with the background of fears and cultural views, religious tendencies. And I don't think you can take that out. But
I think with time, maybe we're able to do some more education, some more orientation, that this indeed isn't harmful or not intended to be harmful to the male folks, but it's something that will actually lead to, I don't use the word liberation, that's scary for them, I believe, but something that will empower everyone.
Obviously, it appears that consensus on the devolution of powers and true federalism and all that doesn't yet exist as far as this Senate is concerned.
Meanwhile, in the House of Representatives,
oh shit, oh take, pray them niggas go away. Oh, we sell the clowns around it, look like circus show.
We begin tonight with the ongoing amendment process of the 1999 Constitution in the National Assembly. Today, the Senate voted against the devolution of powers to the federating units. The senators are not in support of the recommendations that would enable certain items in the concurrent legislative list to be covered by other tiers of government. Apart from the devolution of power, the senators also cast their votes to amend 33 other sections in the Fourth Amendment of the 1999 Constitution. Our correspondent Linda Akigbe reports.
senators arrive at the Senate chamber in groups and also on their own.